generation, is that right? Okay, because my grandparents on both sides of my family came on both the first and the second boats from born. I was born here in on Oahu, and
What was the date?
1943, so that makes me 74. January 2nd, 1943. So that's why I'm so lucky. Every time beginning of the year, my friends remember my birthday because it's right at the beginning of the year. So this year, I think I might go dance at Rumors and go in the
The cage.
the cage if I can still stand. Because hey, if I can still dance, I can still go huli until my last breath of life. I'm gonna celebrate life, and I'm also gonna put in the face of those destructive forces of capitalism, imperialism, the soul-sucking system that kills people every day and makes me cry every day. Like today, I asked Merle, gee, did we hear the deportation that's going on with the so-called illegal immigrants, all of which right here, we're all immigrants other than Larry, who is an indigenous person. You know, so what are we going to do? I mean, I had lunch with a cousin recently, and a dear, dear friend, somehow she's really heavily pro-Trump, and my cousin was so, how do you say, tactful in the way she explained how actually, and then I did ask my girlfriend, wow, aren't you an immigrant too? I mean, actually, aren't we all immigrants unless we're indigenous to the place? But I was raised mainly in the country. I graduated from Castle High, and then I got my master's degree in social work from the University of Hawaii. But I also harkened back to Waiholi School. I went to Waiholi Elementary, then Parker Elementary, and then on to Castle. I grew up in Kaneohe when everybody knew everybody. All of the faces were familiar to me, you know, the family faces, the Waiholi gang. There was a Waiholi gang, and then there's the Hei'ikea gang, and then there's the Kaneohe gang, and we had a graduating class of maybe about 100, and we all knew each other, we all loved each other. As you grow a little bit older and you have a little bit more time, I find that I have time to kind of reflect a little bit more. And I was watching my grandson out on the swing, and I looked at it, and it made me think back to, you know, when I was young and how much I loved to go on that swing and just swing and swing and swing. And the other thing that I really loved to do was, we lived on Waihee Road right next to a taro patch. And in the back of our house was the Akimas, the 100% Hawaiian family. And we would always play together, okay? And you know, the kid time stuff, like you go under the blankets together and hide, and you do all kinds of things like that. So, and maybe even your first kiss. How you like that? What I remember is that my mother always used to have to come and look for me, because one of the things I love to do, I love to climb trees. Oh my God, and everywhere there are trees, but certain trees you have to watch though, because the branches will snap. And I would always be, as a little girl, running around free. We ran free from one house to another, you know. We'd go into, I think it was a Sarakaku's house, a Japanese house, and we could go in and they'd have their little temple set up, and as a little girl I'd always go like this before I went into the house, and then we'd run up Mountcaside and Akima's, and we would tell stories late at night in the dark. I remember Helena Akima scaring all of us with the spooky tales and stuff. But my mother could always find me. I had a favorite tree way in the back, way high, and I would climb up to that tree, and just when the wind, you know, oh, and I love to daydream. That's my favorite thing. I always was a daydreamer. And so then my mom would come to the back when I didn't come home by dinner time, and she'd call me, you know. And it's so funny because I wrote a poem about what does climbing trees have to do with crying about the lo'i, you know. And I believe that climbing trees has everything to do with that, because when you have a time for your mind to be unfettered and you can daydream and you can dream, nothing can hold you back. And then when you get rooted in the lo'i and you see how the dried up streams, you know, all of the streams going into Kenai and the Wailua Nui and that whole area, it makes you have a huge feeling of anger around the injustice of this. And so, yes, I'm what you call, I don't know if you call it a bedroom or bathroom or shower poet, but when I get frustrated, you know, about stuff, because, you know, I've had the experience of having my unfettered spirit just go, you know, and then as high you can go, that's how low you can go, or how angry you can get, you know, at injustice that's going on. So I think that had so much to do with how Kalama Valley became really a clarion call for me. Something happened to me in my life that, you know, there were two paths that I was going to go on, and actually I went on one path. We were very, very poor. My mother raised us. She was a single parent, and when she raised my sister and I, it was at a time she had a divorce, at a time when it was very unusual for women to leave their husbands. You know, they stayed with them till they were beat to death or whatever. They were like chattel, they were property in those days. But my mother was a really spirited person, and she was really quite brilliant and very empathetic, because my grandfather was a minister and had raised his children in what I consider to be, you know, beautiful essence of Christianity, you know. She worked, once she became a single mom, she would work at the state hospital, and she'd bring home cans of food for us to eat, and that was like our food, you know. We'd have stew, cans of stew, and it was really a hard life. We all worked as children, you know, part-time to get through school, and so then when she reached a point where she was almost ready to retire, she had a stroke, and she became disabled, so I had to take care of her. And prior to this, because of my being raised in such poverty, I wanted to rise out of poverty. And so one of the things that I said I was going to do was, I think one of the ways is get a rich husband. So, and I wasn't too bad looking at that time, so I said I'm going to make use of these assets. So I read the etiquette books because we didn't know where the forks and the spoons and everything like that went. But if I was going to get rich and I was going to be with all of these rich people, I had to know how to do all this stuff. And then I became a president of my sorority, vice president of the inter-sorority council, everything like that. So then I got married. And when I got married, after being married for 2 years to a really handsome guy who had tons of affairs on the side, I found out later, I asked myself, is this what life is? You know, I looked at a mountain, I said, I want to hike that mountain. And I don't want to just hike that, I want to hike wherever I can hike, I want to go, but I'm in this life. So then, getting out of it, with my mother disabled, I went into a job with legal aid, Hawai'i legal aid. And because of that feeling, you know, I organized with low income, with welfare rights. And then I also organized against development there at Manalahilahi. And I was always aware of the fact that there was a movement going on. And I got involved with the so-called house and started learning about the world through Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought. And I watched the Kalama Valley struggle, and I was very intrigued by the fact that they were actually fighting against eviction, and they were willing to put their lives and bodies on the line. So when they had the occupation, that's when I said, I'm going to walk into that valley.
Remember that date? Approximately.
I think somehow there's 5/11/70 or something stays in my mind. What is that? Is that the eviction, or is that when they called the
5/11/71 was the arrest. So you're talking before.
Yeah, but the occupation, how long did it last? It only
about
lasted
a year and a half.
No, there was another. I think this was the last occupation. This was after they asked the people to I'm sorry to put it this way, but they said it was going to be a locals only struggle because it needed to really address local issues. And then there was an occupation, and you folks had the guard shack got put up.
Yeah, that was in 1970. That was summer of 1970.
Well, all I know is that occupation didn't last very long, because that's when we're camped in tents. We had a guard shack. I only remember that occupation lasting maybe about 20 days or something, 30 days, or the last one, that led to the arrest.
No, there was only one occupation. That was a little over a year.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so then I must have walked in. I wasn't there. Maybe I was there a month or two, a couple of months. You know, that occupation might have been going on, and I made the decision, like many different people, to walk into the valley. And because of the issues that it represented. You know. So my...
Did you have any fears, or, you know, you said you had a sort of vision of what a life you wanted to be, like you wanted to be rich and stuff.
I know.
Going to the valley, I'm thinking that, you know, whoa, you know.
I know.
My reputation is going to be tarnished.
I think I missed a step. So what happened was, you know, it's like there's two paths open to you, you know, and one is to go this way, and then, but then throughout my life, one of the things that I really valued was critical thinking, and that my attitude was like, if you have an enemy, study it, and if you have a real friend, study that too. I've always been curious, so I've always wanted to study things. So I think that was what pulled me in. At the times they are changing, you know. everything was in motion at that time. And so I wanted to understand what was going on in the world. And getting exposed to the study of MLM, you know, helped me to understand the world. So in understanding the world and hating injustice, I was torn between, okay, are you going to be standing with the oppressed of the world, or are you going to be part of the oppressor? And I couldn't stand the thought. It just made me sick to my stomach to stand with the oppressors of the world, you know, and all what they're doing, the damage and the destruction. So in my heart and intellectually, I got pulled very strongly. It was really clear to me that what I wanted my life to stand for, you know. So then that's how I got very, very much drawn to Kalama Valley. But being a woman, you somehow in those days, and even until really quite recently, I never did really speak up that much, you know. I would support other leadership, and I married solely, you know, supported his leadership, but then there would be certain things that would draw me, and then I would have differences of opinion with Soli. And then after a while in life, now I'm getting to the age where, you know, I'm at the last stage of my life. I'm going to go to sleep the summers and winters away. I start kind of feel like, well, what the hell did my whole life stand for if I'm not going to speak up on stuff? You know, take a position and not just be supportive of somebody else, you know, so as a woman, you know, so always in that supporting somebody else, supporting, but hey, what if I have a little bit of a difference? I have a right to speak up about that difference, you know, and I should speak up, especially if it has world consequences, you know. So, yeah, that's what Kalama Valley, it really represented to me, that taking away of land, stepping on people's necks, you know, evicting them, pushing them further and further so that they're going to be pushed off the edge of the world. Just like, look what's happening now. Look at all the homeless. Remember the days, I don't know if you guys remember, I mean, young people might not even ever have seen those days. You never saw a homeless person. There was always room in the family. There was always room, the friends, somebody. I was maybe 18 years old when I saw my first homeless person, and I'll always remember I saw this person. We were going on I went to YWCA, Y Teens Conference in California, and I saw my first homeless person. She was an Asian woman, I can see her face, standing, begging for a handout as we went on a tour craft, you know, got on a boat. I never in Hawaii did we ever see a homeless people. And now look at the homeless are our neighbors. The guy who used to live 2 doors down the road and he lost his house is sleeping across the street with his girlfriend. You know, what the heck is happening? This ravages of capitalism, imperialism, and what we saw the first time when we stood up, you know, to fight that eviction. I'm sure those evictions were happening before, you know, but that's the first time that we stood and said, no more, stop this.
Yeah, I think I have no evidence right now. There were probably prior struggles, land struggles. I'm not sure of the date. I think 1959 statehood, I think the Kalama Valley struggle was one of the first. But I think what made it somewhat unique is that we got the media's attention. Like no other incident in the 60s, the media, radio and television and the daily newspapers took a hold of it. And then it went national to Look Magazine and Newsweek, and on the cover of the Rolling Stones. Unfortunately, I don't have it, but letters from Mao Zedong and letters from Fidel Castro came in.
Wow.
Because for these people, internationally and nationally, Hawaii was a beautiful place, no problems.
Sure.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
all of
supposedly
a
no
sudden
problems.
there was an explosion in Hawaii. And this was unlike anything that people knew. Wow, look what's happening in Paradise. So we got international coverage, we got national coverage. Francine Duplay came, we got these writers from all over the world.
That's
who
where I
were
first
calling.
learned about the Kalama Valley, because I was in Boston and I was reading it in the New Yorker magazine.
Wow.
So that's what I think
That-
made our struggle unique, is that we got the attention of the media.
Yeah.
And I don't think any other land struggle before us got that kind of attention.
So there was actually a sort of a struggle before Kalama Valley. It was like the Hawaii Kai, the Luna Lima Home Road, all the farms there. My auntie had a carnation farm there, and they had to lease the land. And so what happened was that they did go to the state legislature and they had a protest, but it wasn't organized.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like Kalama Valley where actually there was outside agitators that came. You know what I mean? And so of course that got stuffed very quickly and very efficiently by the powers that be. You know. Whereas Kalama Valley was a different situation. You know?
You know, I think that what you just said about outside agitators, I think a critical thing is education, yeah? And that people who had gone away and got a worldview of what was happening and exposure to the world, then they came back to Hawaii and they said, I want to do something about my home.
Yeah.
And that are these so-called outside agitators.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to have that combination of both that guy who's going to be either in the lo'i or at that front line of eviction to take a stand and say, no more, I'm not going to do this. But also the combination of understanding what's happening in the world, the dynamics of the world, and then the strategy, and then you put that together. And it's really, I think that's what made Kalama Valley powerful. All those young, brilliant people who'd gone away, got exposed to the world, and their minds got blown, and they came back and they said, I really want to stand for something. And then standing with George Santos, Black Richards, Moose Louie, on the ground, that makes a powerful combination.
In addition to what Gwen just said, the Kalama Valley was owned by the Bishop Estate. It wasn't owned by Dillingham or Kaiser. And with the Bishop Estate, of course, comes the community schools. And I think for the trustees, what I was told by some officials at Kameme, it was difficult because in the leadership role, of course, were alumni. Joy Ahn, class of 54, Solini Hale, class of 60, Larry Kamakabivole, class of 61, Pete Thompson, class of 67. We were not from the mainland, we were not Caucasian. This was their own.
With Joy too.
And Edwina Kaka, didn't she graduate?
No,
Oh, she did?
Edwina
Oh,
went
she
to the
did.
8th grade and then moved to the mainland.
Oh,
But
okay.
so this is the first time that the Bishop Estate was confronted by their own people who they partly helped to educate.
Right.
These were not people from California or what. So I think it took them a while to figure this one out. It was not that easy to shove us off
Yeah.
We were not from Punahou. We were not from Iolani. We were not from Farrington
Or Castle High.
or Castle High. We were from Kamehameha.
And you know, can I just say something? There's a very underreported or estimated thing of the effects of Kalama Valley, but I was there to see the effects of it. After Kalama Valley, the trustees, the school, alumni, everybody had to really reevaluate this thing, this concept of a school on the hill thing. And after, a result of Kalama Valley was there was a huge outreach effort for education in the communities.
Extension education.
Yeah, extension education, schools, moving schools
Neighbor
out,
islands.
you know, and to helping, assisting, and not just be a school on the hill. And that to me, we had to counter this thing, this image of the school on the hill for the elites.
Yeah.
So that was a huge benefit to
Good.
Native Hawaiian people. I remember there's a really incredible camaraderie when you are together in that situation and there is an enemy right outside the gate that's ready, waiting to destroy you. You really have such, that collectivity that you enjoy is just incredible. And it was very similar like when we went and we occupied Waihuli. I mean, when we held Waihuli Waikani, just like we held in Kalama Valley. You know, the togetherness that you have, the feeling of that oneness of spirit and mind, you know, that no matter what happens, we are, we're gonna stand there, you know. So that was really an incredible experience for me. The other was learning. I always remember like Jean Parker giving the ABCs of socialism and me reading it. And hey, you know, this world is like, where the heck is all this craziness coming from, you know? But to learn a scientific method about analyzing that is really, it arms you for the rest of your life about what is happening systemically, that goes all the way down to, you know, you living and getting kicked out of a valley. Why? And it makes so much sense that there's a whole systemic way, and that there are allies that we can hook up to, you know, like these advanced people who are in other struggles, you know, that can give us strength, you know. So that was just, I loved that, learning about the world and learning why this is happening, that's happening. And the other thing that I really learned to love, and it stood me good all the way, is how to take from being an underdog, this MLM thinking, Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong. Hey, that's the map on how to fight and how to survive and how to live, because that's a book of saying, we, the most oppressed of the world, this is how we can link up together and fight back and win. Boy, that, if anybody wants to learn, and that, I use that through my life. When I was working, twice I got, you know, they tried to fire me in different ways. Well, actually, maybe it was 3 times. And I learned through my strategy of how to stand, you know, fight, unite all who can. And and use all of that strategy of the underdog to survive. And they were never able to fire me. But of course, at one point, at the end, I did have legal advice, a legal person, Eric Seitz, who is one of the best in the country in American law, and helped me to keep my job. But those are the things I would say: the camaraderie and collectivism, learning a scientific way, so those are the things that I really treasured and learned from the Kalama Valley struggle. George, I'll tell you, it's so funny because I always remember the story that Pete said. He said, doggone, he said it at Soli's memorial. He said, that darn guy Soli, he could make you do anything. He said, like getting George to live with him, with Pete, and then leaving George there, so that George stayed with him until, unfortunately, until he passed.
Yeah.
But how kind Pete,
That's
and
Camforth Road, right?
huh?
Yeah.
Camforth Road.
Camforth.
Camfort Road.
His grandfather's cottage.
Yeah.
And George lived, once he went there, he lived on the sofa in the living room. And that
The one that
was,
was facing the front, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
yes.
Yeah.
And Sylvia, Sil, and Pete were in their little room. I don't know if they had a bigger bed than us, but Soli and I were in a little room, and we had a one little cot thing. Boy, I don't know how we fit on that. We were thin and young and strong then. But what I remembered about George was, this is what, nobody used to stand up to Soli, because Soli was, I don't know, he was like a Hawaiian god or something. He was the Hawaiian god. Handsome, strong, charismatic. But you know what, that guy, we're together, and sometimes he would just get on me. And do you know what I always remember was George lying on that sofa. He was the only one, and he would go, shut up, Soli. And when he would do that, then Soli would shut up. And he was my hero. And he was really such a hard-working man. He had a heart of gold. Dang, I love George Santos. He's my hero. Black was quite something. He was like the mechanic in the valley. Anything worked. And he was the handsomest, toughest, and blackest Hawaiian I ever knew. I tell you, that was why maybe his name was Black. Black Richards, And he always had this little thing around his head. And I remember one time going into his boudoir, and oh my God, Black had this girlfriend. He had scarves all over his bed. He was quite a natty guy. And the one thing that he said to me one time when Gene Parker and I were on the radio talking about Bob Avakian and revolution, he listened to the program. He had gone into the hills in Mokuokeawe, and we talked on the phone, and he said, Gwen, he said, you gotta say them more clear, and you have to be more hard. I was too soft. I wasn't strong enough. Black said, you gotta really tell it like it is. He said, you gotta tell it like it is and make it harder. He said, it's revolution and fight. Gotta fight. You gotta be more strong, he told me. That's what Black Richards told me. That was not hard enough.
Were you there when during the bus time, or when people on the bus, the cops came
No,
on?
no, we weren't. He and I had gone out because he had to go to a job. I had to go take care of my mom. So I remember clearly that morning us getting to, and then we had the word that the bus hit. So we weren't there at the time. One of the things that, I learned throughout my life is sometimes you have to retreat so you can live again. And always in my mind was that I was going to live again. And when I could, I was going to take another blow. And it's hard. Life was real hard through different times when I've had to retreat. But then when I've been able to come back and take that blow, well, there were several different struggles. We were in, welfare rights, my holy Waikani, and then for a while I had to really pull back, and then I guess it's called, came back with the vengeance when, we did Terry and I talked about, we were supportive, we were standing against the nuclear testing in Tahiti, and Soli was quite involved at that time, and through Nuclear Free and Independent Pacific, NFIP, people had come up here. There were several visitors who'd come up, and we, through HCAM, Hawaii Coalition Against Nuclear Testing, we formed that group. There was marches, we had marches and everything, and we actually went to the embassy, the French embassy, and threw rotten fish at the door, and we went with Hank Raymond and
that was Terry Lee Kiko'ole's
Terry Lee, husband, and their Miri Vidal was one of our members, and we went to the French Consulate General. A representative from Hawaii was speaking at the university, and we tendered him with eviction notices to be evicted from Hawaii because of the destruction of in the Pacific, with our allies. And then another one that is memorable to me is that, we were talking, we said, I remember talking with Kyle and Terry and saying, wow, they're having one of the biggest militarization expansion in Hawaii, and they're going to bring the striker brigades and to the different areas, and nobody knows about this. Nobody seems to. So they had a series of hearings, and then one of the things that we said was, wow, how come they're having all the venues at private property? Was it in Portland?
Portland,
yeah.
Haji?
Yeah, they were wearing the Muslim. One had a Muslim headgear, and that these people are heroes, and that everyday people have in themselves really, they're courageous, and they have deep feelings for justice. And we have to believe in these people and call out, in a certain sense, I don't know how to say it, but poetically and culturally, for people to stand in that way, that because we have to, not only we have to study the analysis, the strategy, and the tactics, but we have to call out to the hearts and minds of the people to stand up in a courageous way, because what's really at stake now is really the world. We've got climate change, we've got this rise of hatred and racism and everything that makes us small and vicious and mean, which is the one that we want to feed in the world? Do we want to feed the people that gave their lives for others, and that one young man who said with his last gasping breath, I want all the people in this train to know I love them. He was willing to die for that. So which one are we going to feed? Are we going to feed that part of courage and, you know, be willing to stand to save the earth and humanity and the downtrodden? Or are we going to feed that ugly orange monster, you know, of Trumpism, you know, hatred and the selfies and the me firstism, and, you know, turn my eye away from that homeless person? No, and I believe really that you cannot just have a vision, you actually have to live it, okay, every day. You have to struggle and live it, you know. Like when I say a demeaning thing to my granddaughter, or, you know, out of anger or whatever it is, I have to really introspect, I have to really look to see how is my behavior. When I think, oh gee, I don't know if I really want that much homeless peeing and defecating, you know, here or there. I have to really start examining that, you know, about myself, so that I think that I would envision a world where everyone would have the opportunity. I love the definition of communism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And I would want a world where everyone with their talents could thrive to their maximum, you know, whatever talent, everybody has different talents, and have the ability to learn about the world, learn about their skills, develop it to the max. I would want a world where everyone would have health care, they'd have access to art, they'd have a home, shelter, food, medical care. But you know what? Those assholes that are in control of the whole thing are not going to give it up willingly. So we also have to have the courage to fight for it and risk ourselves, so we can have an earth that the glaciers aren't melting to take over our shores, you know, so that our kids can go and surf, and they can kanikapila, they can, and that nobody feels I'm lesser or better, you know. Like how Soli used to say, oh, unfortunately, you know, the wish of a slave is not freedom, but to have a slave of his own. Now we gotta, and I think what his point was, we gotta bust through that. We have to break through that mentality. It's a chain on us that the wish of a slave is not freedom, but to have a slave of his own. We have to break through that mentality that we would want, that would be abhorrent to us, to have a slave of our own. That we want freedom, and we want freedom for every man. I learned a lot from my two cousins, okay, Nick Goodness and Butch Goodness, who was a member, Butchie was a member of Kokua Hawaii, and he had gone away to the Vietnam War, and he was a crew chief, he was a sergeant, and he was a gunner, yeah, in Vietnam. And what he did when he came back, he had bullet wounds, and he's had like Purple Hearts or something like that. But this is a story that he told me that really kind of changed my life. And he said, you know, Gwenny, there's something wrong with this war, the Vietnam War. He said, you know, we're going in with our machine gun. We're going in with everything we got, and there's a farmer down there, and he puts down his farming implement, he picks up a rifle, and he's shooting at us with his rifle. We're coming in with a helicopter and a machine gun. He said, I don't think we go win this war. He said, something is going wrong. And oh boy, did that ever, you know, affect me. And then my other cousin, Nick, he was involved in the Roxy sit-in, where they protested against the Vietnam War, and they burned down one of the buildings. I don't know really who burned it down, but he was closely linked, and I'm sure he knows who did, and his girlfriend. And so he was telling me this stuff. I was getting exposed to it. And so I told him, I said, to my cousin Nick, I don't, because I was like a hawk, you know, at that time. I said, I don't understand. We got so much firepower. Why don't we just go in and nuke them or whatever, do whatever, which we're already doing with Agent Orange. Why don't we just obliterate it? And I always remember the look on my cousin's face. Nick, he looked at me like, it was incredulous, like, oh, Gwenny, you got a lot to learn. So he had me read Hawaii Pono'i, you know, and I read it. He said about the history of Hawaii, what's going on in Hawaii, and the Big Five and all that. I remember reading that book. That was the first time I ever read a political book. Talk about being incredulous, crying, angry. What is going on? The history, you know, how the treatment of the queen and things. Oh my goodness, that was the beginning of my political education. And then one of the things that I did was I went on a trip with my cousin Nick's friend. So I went with him on this trip, and we went on a motorcycle through San Francisco and stuff like that, and then he took me back we went to New York. He set me up at a place right in Greenwich Village, which was a historic place, and I stayed in the home of an artist there. But then I went to go visit, I went on the train from New York, and I went to go visit my cousin, who was an aide to Hiram Fong. And my cousin took me out to this bar, okay, which is some kind of a famous bar that all of the people, the higher ups, yeah, the high makamakis that work there, hang out at this bar, okay. And I remember sitting at this bar, and this guy was an attorney, and he was head of all the Senate attorneys. He worked for Strom Thurmond, who was one of the most powerful senators at that time in the legislature. Okay, so we're all drinking, my cousin, me, and this tall, handsome Holly guy, and then you know, and this was right at the time of the height of the Black Panthers were getting killed, they were getting arrested, they were in court, and he said to me, those niggas, they think they're gonna get big, watch them, we'll take care of them. And I sat there and I looked at him, and I was going to say something, and my cousin said, no, Gwen, don't say anything, okay? She's working for Hiram Fong, right? Of course, and he's working for the most powerful senator. Oh my God. I said to myself, in the heart of this U.S. government are these snakes. That was the beginning of me beginning to be absolutely adamant that we got to bring this thing down. We got to bring it down. And I also met another guy who was part of the Black nationalist movement when I was in New York. He took me to CUNY, C-U-N-Y, and we went to a fundraiser for the Black Panthers. And the Last Poets were playing there, and there was this other guy, Isaac Hayes. Yeah, Isaac Hayes. They were, and apparently this friend of mine his name was Lloyd Douglas. I heard he later became a legislator in the New York Senate or something for New York, but he was apparently a good best friend with Stokely Carmichael, and at that time Stokely Carmichael was on the run, and he took me to this fundraiser. The Last Poets did the performance as a case, and then he also took me up to a small fundraising thing that was held at the apartment of Flo Kennedy. She was a well-known civil rights lawyer, and what's the other lady who was a poet? Maya Angelou. I remember when I was very young, you know, we went in there, and apparently because he was a well-known black nationalist, they welcomed him. They were kind of surprised he was there and all like that. But then I remember him introducing me to the young Maya Angelou, who was just absolutely beautiful, and Flo Kennedy. And it was at the apartment of Flo Kennedy. And then he took me to the Panther 21 trial too. So all in this one visit, I was exposed to, you know, all of this. And then also I had a cousin who's very wealthy, and she hooked me up with her friend who's a Wall Street broker or something, and then he took me to Harvard Square because he had to go in for a meeting with the people who are running Harvard or something. So I'm in Harvard Square, they have a Black Panther rally, and I hook up with a guy who was a Black Panther there, just talked with him, you know. It was crazy. Can you imagine?
Extreme.
Little girl from Hawaii going there, getting exposed to all of this. It blew my mind. And then I came back, and I think that's when, after that, I walked into, shortly after I walked into Kalama Valley, you know, when the house wouldn't do anything to support it.
Can you explain what the house was?
Oh, okay, the house was a phenomenon of that period of time when the Vietnam War protests were going on, the Cambodian invasion, all of those things were going on. And there were a whole bunch of people, like how what Larry had happened to Larry, you know. They went, the youngest, the best and the brightest from Hawaii went away to what we used to call the mainland, and now we call it continent. Okay, so, or Turtle Island, you can call it Turtle Island if you want to. And when they went away to school, they came back and they had these ideas and things to share. And so there were people like Herb Takahashi and Mel Chang and a bunch of other guys. They all, well, the leadership, of course, was Herb. And they formed a collective there, I guess. And I think Merle knew a lot more about the things that were going on at the house. But I was always on the fringes. And I was not part of this collective mandate that was said that you could not actually go to Kalama Valley because you might be arrested. And so I went. I was a free spirit, you know. I remember that Panther trial, they were going, oh, they were getting devastated. I remember us sitting in that courtroom, and I saw one guy, and he saw Lloyd, you know, and he just went like this, but I could see in his face, he just knew they were gonna get decimated, you know, because they already had been, many of them had been already killed at that time.
Yeah, they were just going, they showed footage of when they raided the apartment, and they just gunned everybody down.
Oh, they just slaughtered them. It was a lesson. Don't you ever stand up to us. This is what we've got to do. Even if they were within their legal rights, you know, there wasn't anything they could bear arms, all of those things. What were they doing? They're demonstrating. The system was so threatened by them, you know. I think it was the standing up, you know, not talking, not just talking. Talking's okay. Not just studying, but action.
And do you think that, of course, that set up a lot of the resistance that has happened up to this time?
Well, I think too, Kalama Valley captured the essence of the contradictions that were happening at that point in time in terms of land struggle, domination, you know, contradictions between those that had power and those that didn't. And also I think what Kalama Valley did, it captured our imagination.
Our vision.
It captured our imagination, captured our vision, it spoke to our hearts and our minds, and it motivated us. You know, we were willing to die. We were willing to die for what we believed.
Amen.
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 It's a Sydney
Amen.
prayer.
Amen. Amen. Popping down.